Proving that those with everyday jobs can easily be the saviors of their own universe, Mail Mole releases on March 4th, 2021 on the PC on the Steam Store, the Nintendo Switch, and the PlayStation 4, with the game then releasing on the Xbox One on March 5th, 2021. The game cost $14.99 and is a 3D platformer that focuses on moving around the terrain underground to get around the various landscapes you'll come across. But before I begin this review, this key was obtained from the developer, Toppa Games, for the purposes of review. That won't change my opinion of the game in the end, but you should know that because of FTC guidelines, as well as the whole morals thing, you know? Mail Mole starts out with Monty being called back from his vacation, as his home, Carrotland, is being threatened by mysterious hackers, completely draining the island of its energy. I mean, yes, one must question the mayor and how all the power stations are available on the same network. I suspect someone used the same passwords, but they need Monty to hand-deliver the power reset codes to the stations in order to get power back to the island. Wait. The hackers were able to shut them down remotely, but the codes have to be manually entered and aren't actually available at the station and have to be delivered by the postman? Needless to say, if you think about the story for more than a second, the idea about it falls apart. But that's not the point. All this story is doing is providing a reason for Monty to go on his adventure, and it's focusing on the gameplay more than anything else. And thus, it does do its job, even though the characters that are tied to the story aren't exactly as memorable as other games' side characters in the genre. With that said, obviously I want to highlight the game's gameplay first, given the fact that the story isn't exactly the star here. And this is where the game is going to be decisive to certain types of players. Mail Mole is very much a focused type of platforming game, specifically on movement and collection rather than battling and exploration, at least for the most part. In fact, in non-boss worlds, there are no enemies to take out here, although there are hazards that may shoot at you and traps that will get in your way, and environments that you'll have to navigate without falling into a vast amount of different types of pits. But for some, the lack of enemies may sound daunting. Even a single Goomba, the easiest of enemies in the Mario series, provide a simple but reasonable first hurdle for a player to face, having to correspond their movement with the environment and the traps around them and the Goomba. With Mail Mole basically simplifying that formula without enemies, it seems that the gameplay would suffer if only the other side can't keep its end of the bargain up in terms of a reasonable challenge for fun gameplay. And let me be perfectly clear for veterans of the genre. If you base your opinion out in the first world of this game, you'll end up thinking that the game is nowhere worth your time, as the amount of difficulty you face in this first section is the equivalent of the hurdle right here. This is despite the fact that it is completely necessary for the overall structure of the game and how they designed it. You may be asking yourself how that makes any frickin' sense, and yeah, reading it back, I can understand that confusion. Let me explain. The unique aspect of Mail Mole is something you can right now see on screen. Monty moves like an old Warner Brothers gopher, digging through the ground to get the place to place. Like in those old cartoons, and they would hit the fence and then everything would, shake for a little bit and they would be dizzy, that kind of thing. This snake-like movement has an inherent momentum to it, thanks to the directional speed of the animation that plays, and feeling very car-like in its movement presentation, despite the fact that you can stop and reset yourself at any point, and you can relatively stop on a dime. But the bigger impact comes in the jumping mechanism of the game, where you have to move from one platform to another by what any other platforming protagonist would do: jump. And like some of those other games, your jump height is based on how long you hold the button, and the minimum height in which you can jump here is very, very small, almost even a hop of sorts. On top of that, your jump can have an arc to it depending on how you're moving. So if you hit the button a little bit, yeah, you're gonna do a small little arc. But if you hold it for a bit and you aren't necessarily going that fast, you may have a reasonable arc that you have in terms of your jump. Part of why I think the first section of gameplay is so basic in this game and the level design is so basic and that it doesn't have that many real hazards in a literal sense is that the game is expecting you to get used to this different movement style. And to be fair, you need that time. You may not realize it and you may be thinking, oh yeah, this is easy, I don't really have a problem here, but you do need it. Now, you do have other techniques that can help with movement. You do have a ground pound that can be used against crates, but when jumping, this can help stop your momentum, which it can actually save you when you're about to jump to your death accidentally. Now, you also have a dash button when you're digging through the ground to go a little bit faster, but that's not what I'm talking about in terms of how that helps movement. Sure, it makes it go faster, but when you use it just as you're about to hit the ground again, you do a semi-attack dash boost that you can use to gain back some momentum on a jump and really keep the speed going. Those who really are speed runners and really want to see how fast they can do a level and get these gold medals that this game gives will find this to be the move they come back to again and again. But that move can also screw you over if you use it on the wrong small platforms because you'll pull a Wile E. Coyote. So the game doesn't start that difficult, but when the game starts introducing hazards at a reasonable rate, especially when dealing with repeated hazards that move in and against your direction, you start to see the real potential of the gameplay here and the unique angle. Having to almost rhythmically move from one platform to another while timing your jumps and the different heights can be more tough than it first looks, especially when you let your other habits in the platforming genre influence you and you start to make a mistake or two, especially when you're close to a platform and you make a little jump and then you just sort of fall into the water. When the game shifts tactics and changes things up with different hazards over and over again, like bombs that have circle patterns that move outward, or having a rising lava wave that force you to move back and forth, you really appreciate the different type of platforming gameplay that Topla Games have brought forward here. The game is at its best when it's necessary to move, whether it be through forced hazards that are pushing you out of your space, or through a speed section like you see on the screen. Really, if the game was nothing but these speed sections, I would have really enjoyed it, overall. But yes, I do like the variation here. What you won't get, however, is puzzles, which, to be perfectly honest, is sort of a shame. I mean, yes, you push beach balls into their colored holes to activate, certain locks, but that's not a puzzle. And really, I feel like if the game really thought about using its movement aspect and made you use it in conjunction with some logical puzzle element, this game would have been a must-buy. Sure, you have situations where you have to jump to activate the right platform in a sequence over and over again, for example. But I'm talking about taking a step beyond that and pushing that concept to the next level, especially using the fact that all the different height jumps are there. That could have been really interesting, and if they do a sequel, they should really play around with that, because this movement style and the just potential of puzzle platforming could have really been interesting. Not to say that this game isn't interesting and fun. I had fun, and even though it took me about 4 and 5 hours to beat the game, not collecting everything, I can't say that I didn't enjoy myself. There's just one thing that it's really missing, and that is the oomph factor that I talk about in other reviews. The fact is that Male Mole is competent. Its level design has a lot of detail to it, and some of it is really well structured. The gameplay and the controls do well in terms of being able to control your creature and being able to use more advanced tactics at times. But with all that said, and with all the gameplay that I played, the only thing that ever really punched me in the face in terms of what I loved about it were the speed sections. And those speed sections were only here and there, and they weren't things that I hadn't seen in other games before. I think 3D platformers and some of the high bars that were set by some of the N64 games and games like Mario and A Hat in Time sometimes put a little bit too much expectation on other games in the genre that come out. And I think, unfortunately, Mail Mole is going to fall into that category. For example, you may look at some of the environments here and think, oh, this will be something that'll be wonderful to explore. This is something that I can find all these little details in. But really, a lot of it is linear. There are sections where you can move about platforms a little bit, but in the end, it is a very linear game more than anything else. And for some people, that's going to be great. Those expecting the old days of things like DK64, where you're finding that last banana or that last item that was really off in a place that you never would have expected, you're not going to find that here. Most of the items, the optional radishes that unlock cosmetics, they are pretty close to the main path of the game, and they are things that you really should find. You just gotta go out of your way to do it, but really, it's not anything that you shouldn't expect from the genre. The cleverness of some of those elements, it's there at times, but it's not something that you're going to latch onto. And again, I'm coming back to the point of the game is good. The game is great in certain areas, but again, it doesn't punch you in the face. And I wonder in this genre, will people be okay with that? With games like Hat in Time, for example. With that said, sometimes the game doesn't exactly realize some of the things that they needed to change due to the different type of gameplay they were going for here, and put some standards in there that I wouldn't necessarily have kept. Now, it's great that the game has hazards similar to other platformers in things like lava pools and swinging hazards like seen here. Those are fine. But here's the thing. Look at this shooting hazard. Remember, you're a mole underground. You can see that our mole here seems to be under the size of this projectile here. But of course, if the projectile flies over you, you take damage. Now, you are actually making contact with the bullet in many cases. The fact is that your body comes up out of the ground and it's enough for the bullet to hit you. But unlike other games where the body is above the ground, when you're looking at the camera angles here, sometimes it's not so obvious. Sometimes, yeah, you can actually get under it, but sometimes you can't. And the lack of detail there at times can be a little bit frustrating, even though that, well, no, you actually got hit. It's also little things like the cosmetic aspect of the game here that bother me. Just like Super Mario Odyssey and other platforming games, you can customize Monty with a unique hat, glasses, and accessory. My personal favorite was the monocle and top hat, with a jetpack, of course. These are paid for with the carrots that you collect, and some of them are unlocked with the optional radishes that come in pairs of 3 in each level, even if the currency and the unlock items are a little bit all over the place here. So, there's no DLC type of thing, that's great. So what's the problem? Well, it's the fact that most of the time, you're not going to see it. I mean, you're underground most of the time. And even in some of the talking sections, you're seeing Monty from behind him. So yeah, I can see my jetpack, but nothing else. You can't see the face portion, which is weird. It's very, very present at the end of a level, but that's about it. Now, some of you may be pointing out, Dragnix, you have referenced other platformers a lot, and aren't you one person who usually says that, hey, you know, a game needs to be its own game, and the comparisons to other games and those expectations are a little bit too high, and aren't you just, you know, being contradictory? To a certain extent, I would agree with you, but unfortunately, Mail Mole definitely shows at times that it is influenced by other games in the genre, in particular the Super Mario Galaxy and Super Mario Sunshine games. When the game actually does the little sting and the little intro of the level like those Galaxy and Sunshine games, and the little ending animation that you see to show, hey, I did it, I did all the things. It's very much invoking the spirit of those games. And I don't want to say it's copying, it's not. It's got its own little thing to it, and it's obvious that the influence of those games is strong in this game, and that game is the fan of the developers. But unfortunately, in that same breath, you're sitting there going, oh, yeah, but it's not Mario. Just take a look and see what I'm talking about here. As for the game's basic presentation, it's cute. It uses a lot of pastel colors and a lot of line work that is simple but is able to bring forth in a world that is interesting yet not something that we haven't seen before. Monty himself is got a good outline to him, and the cosmetics really do work, and a lot of the worlds do have their own personality overall. It's just that there is some limitations in terms of the effects here. Things like a lava wave going over and over again. Yeah, it looks like a wave, but there's just a little small detail here and there that could have made it a little bit more, I don't want to say realistic, but realistic to the world in question. But the overall impression is that it really complements the not too hard, not too easy, but laid back nature of the game in terms of the platforming, and I really do appreciate it. It's perfect for kids, but it's also perfect for that generation that grew up on N64 or even Super Nintendo in terms of the colors used and sort of the relaxing nature of the game. Sure, there's high action sections, but in the end, it does give that sort of calming effect. Sound design is simple, and the audio quality is reasonable. You do get the sounds of you jumping and the sort of hiccup that comes from Monty, and you do get smashing and some sound effects here and there, although at times you feel like there's something missing to it. Not necessarily bad, but not necessarily something that draws your attention, but it complements the gameplay well. As for the game's music, it's good for the presentation in question here. It does have the beach vibes in the certain areas. It does have the action-packed elements when you do have a speedy section. It does have that sort of boss theme when you do run into a boss here and there. It's not something that you will want to listen to over and over again. It won't be something that you put on your playlist, but when it comes to complementing the gameplay, yeah, it works. Take a listen. In the end, Mail Mole is going to be a game that certain types of platformer players will hate. Certain players will love it, however, and everybody else will find a game that's pretty alright, but nothing too spectacular. Its unique movement style does stand out in the genre, regardless of being in other games as subforms, and when the game pushes the difficulty with hazards, you will be reminded of those old 3D Marios and the first time you played them. But some repetition and little hiccups here and there will also bring you back down to earth and make you wonder maybe the game could have been better with certain other elements changed. That's why my final score for Mail Mole is a 72 out of 100, making it a niche buy for platforming players, or a sale title for those not too strongly interested in the genre. But that doesn't take into account my enhancer system, which matches a game to you. If you fall into one of the following categories, add or subtract that category score into the main score, thus bringing out your personal score. Then see this chart to see if the buyability rating for the game has changed for you, usually because the first digit has changed. As you can see, even platforming players will have some things that they'll have to consider if they want to play this game, and those looking for more character-based or more, showy kinds of things may not necessarily want to look here. But speedrunners and those who like to, maximize how they get through a level, yeah, you'll definitely enjoy it. In addition, because I received a review copy of this game, I will be giving away a copy of the game on Steam. Mostly because it's the easiest way to gift somebody a copy. I mean, have you tried it on the other platforms? For you to be entered into this, all you need to do is 2 things. 1, join my Discord in the description below. Yes, maybe this would be a thing to just get more people into the Discord to see more of my Twitch streams and things like that. But honestly, it's just to make it easier to actually find a person who eventually wins without having to play a huge waiting game and then question whether or not they came back at the wrong time. But secondly, make a suggestion on how to make these reviews better in the comments section below. Or give a game that MailMole reminds you of that you would recommend people to try in the comments section below. The more obscure the better. I'll choose a person to give a copy of the game after the review has been posted for a week or so to give people a little bit of time to see it. Anyway, this is Dragnix signing out for now, and you'll see another video soon. In fact, it may be within an hour. Okay, it may be within a day, but, that's a little bit abnormal for this channel. Anyway, keep on gaming.